Greetings and salutations, loyal viewers of this channel. My name is Sean, and today we got to talk about Vice President Kamala Harris's CNN town hall. And by the way, this is quite a surprising development for me because I made a little bit of a promise to myself that she had to be significantly worse than she was in the NBC interview that we previously covered. And holy crap, she met that threshold. Just when I think she can't get any worse, she shows up and is even worser than she was previously. And that's exactly what we saw on full display in this town hall. Now, we're going to get into this. We're going to break this down. But before I do, I want to thank everybody who supports this channel via actualjusticewarrior.com/join.
Give me the money. Give me the money. Okay.
Now, in case you guys missed my debate on whether or not libertarians should vote for Kamala Harris, which was the position my opponent took, I will also link that in the description in full for you to check it out. But without further ado, let's get into this.
Imagine now Donald Trump in the Oval Office, in the Situation Room. He who has openly admired dictators, said he would be a dictator on day one. The former chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff has said he is a fascist to the core.
Do you think Donald Trump is a fascist?
Yes, I do. Yes, I do.
So without a doubt, we have seen a shift in tone yet again in the Kamala Harris campaign, and a perfect example of that shift in tone is what you saw right there. Now, the topic that she wants to bring up over and over and over again is that the evil orange man is Hitler, the evil orange man is a fascist, which may sound like it's not new to you guys because you've been hearing this for nearly 10 years about this individual, but for the Kamala Harris campaign that was supposedly about joy and vibes and just churning the page generically, out of desperation, they have resorted to this tactic. So we have a long-winded opening from Kamala based on this question where she just rambles about it nonstop. But honestly, that's standard fare for Democrats. They've been doing that to the evil orange man since he came down the escalator. Let's be perfectly honest about that. What I'm far more interested in are her other different various answers that were just embarrassing.
My question is this. If you could accomplish only one major policy goal that required congressional action, what would it be and why?
Now look, there are some very bad answers that Kamala Harris gives in this town hall, incomprehensible answers, and considering the predictability of these questions, there's no excuse for this. But I found this particular question on if you had to boil it down to your primary goal, your top number one issue, what would it be? Because of this basic question about her number one priority to get through Congress, she doesn't have an answer for. Just think about that.
Well, there's not just one. I have to be honest with you, Carol. There's a lot of work that needs to happen, but I think that maybe part of this point that how I think about it is we've got to get past this era of politics and partisan politics, slowing down what we need to do in terms of progress in our country. And that means working across the aisle. I've done that before. We did it around whether it be what we were able to accomplish with the bipartisan infrastructure deal or some of the work that we have done in terms of dealing with gun safety. But we've got to work across the aisle. And it is my commitment to work with Democrats, with Republicans, with independents to deal with a number of issues, whether it be what we need to do in terms of housing and creating legislation that creates incentives for that, what we need to do to reinstate the freedom of a woman to make decisions about her own body and not have her government tell her what to do, whether it be what we need to do to actually invest in a substantial way in the industries of the future, in American-based manufacturing, in American-based industries where American workers and union workers have those jobs in a way that is good-paying jobs that gives people the dignity they deserve. All of those areas I plan on working across the aisle and with Congress, including the issue of immigration.
Look, I understand that maybe there's a concern that if she says this is her number one priority, then people are going to think that she's only going to be able to do that thing or only going to try to do that thing. But the fact of the matter is, if she does believe that, that is just factually wrong. You ask the evil orange man what his number one priority is, he'll say, depending on the day, immigration, the border, closing the border, or he'll say the economy. And a lot of times he'll link them together as one. If you're VP Kamala Harris, one of the major pillars of your campaign is the abortion issue. And I know I have a lot of pro-life people in my audience, but we have to face the facts. We have to face the polling. The Democrats are winning on that issue. So she could have easily said if she could accomplish one thing legislatively, top of her priorities, it could be Roe versus Wade being reinstated into federal law. And honestly, based on what she's been campaigning on, which is random small small business tax credits or the housing thing, which we talked about ad nauseum on how it will actually increase the price of housing. That seems like the biggest winner issue for her that she could pass with simple legislation if she were to have the votes. And for me, that's an easy one. That's a knock it out of the park kind of issue. She could also lean into all her messaging about how I'm a woman, women's bodies, women's rights, all the things that Democrats say about that issue. Now, I will also point out that Kamala Harris never uses that gender inclusive language that Anna Kasparian was attacked for saying isn't very effective in terms of politics, and nobody attacks her for that. She always says it's a woman's issue and all that. So I do want to point out that everybody who attacked Anna for that is disingenuous and should apologize to her because they're not attacking Kamala for that. But this was a very easy, straight up question that she's received, by the way, over and over again, that she should have been able to knock it out of the park. She could have even said that Roe v. Wade was her top issue or is her top issue, but she's going to work tirelessly on these different other policies. This is not that hard. Again, they asked her a very basic question that somebody running for president should be able to answer, but the fact of the matter is she has no real policy agenda. They just gave her focus group tested talking points. That's why she says small businesses, middle class, to tax the billionaires and all that nonsense.
Well, let's talk about this compromise bill that you want to pass if you're elected. You said that's going to be a priority. It includes $650 million in funding for the border wall. That's something Republicans wanted. That was part of the compromise. Under Donald Trump, you criticized the wall more than 50 times. You called it stupid, useless, and a medieval vanity project. Is a border wall stupid?
Well, let's talk about Donald Trump and that border wall. So remember, Donald Trump said Mexico would pay for it? Come on, they didn't. How much of that wall did he build? I think the last number I saw was about 2%. And then when it came time for him to do a photo op, you know where he did it? In the part of the wall that President Obama built.
Now, the next thing that made me laugh is when Anderson Cooper called her out for all of a sudden being in favor of a bill that has funding for the border wall, and Kamala Harris called this his vanity project, called it a symbol of evil in the country, and all these different various disparaging things. I think she has over 50 public statements against the border wall, and Kamala Harris ends up saying that she's now in favor of the wall, which honestly just makes me laugh. It cracks me up.
But you're agreeing to a bill that would earmark $650 million to continue building that wall.
I pledge that I am going to bring forward that bipartisan bill to further strengthen and secure our border. Yes, I am. And I'm going to work across the aisle to pass a comprehensive bill that deals with a broken immigration system. I think Jackson's question, part of it was to acknowledge that America has always had migration, but there needs to be a legal process for it. People have to earn it. And that's the point that I think is the most important point that can be made, which is we need a president who is grounded in common sense and practical outcomes. Like, let's just fix this thing. Let's just fix it. Why is there any ideological perspective on it? Let's just fix the problem.
To fix the problem, you're doing this compromise bill. It does call for $650 million that was earmarked under Trump to actually still go to build the wall.
I am not afraid of good ideas where they occurred.
So you don't think it's stupid anymore?
I think what he did and how he did it did not make much sense because he actually didn't do much of anything. I just talked about that wall, right? We just talked about
it. It reminds me, honestly, of the Freedom Tunes cartoon when she was announced as the nominee, where they're saying that all the things that you knew about her positions don't exist anymore. And now, instead of being the most liberal senator, she's actually the most conservative senator.
You're denying things we all saw. There are records.
No, there aren't.
She was ranked the single most liberal senator in the country.
No, she was not.
You can't gaslight voters into...
Kamala Harris is conservative.
What?
She was ranked the most conservative senator.
And yeah, I find that to be absolutely hilarious. But I also want to point out for everybody out there in the audience that even though that this is the top line issue or one of the top line issues right now in this moment, the fact of the matter is if Kamala Harris is able to win, if the Democrats get rewarded for ignoring the border crisis for 3.5 years, then pretending that they care about it 3.5 years into the Biden administration, the likelihood that they're going to do anything about securing the border is zero, because they'll say, hey, we can get away with this. It was no big deal. Now, if they lose this election primarily on this issue, that might cause a shift in the Democratic Party on this issue, which would be better long-term for the country if you're somebody who doesn't want the asylum system defrauded in the way that it has been defrauded. So, yeah, I don't believe that she's even going to support that bill that they were talking about in terms of border security. And the reason for that is because it will reward their bad behavior. I also laugh at the fact that Anderson Cooper called her out on the executive orders and said that they should have done this, 1 year ago, 2 years ago, 3 years ago, and she didn't really have an answer for that either.
2022, 2023, there were record border crossings. Your administration took hundreds of executive actions. It didn't stem the flow. Numbers kept going up. Finally, in 2024, just in June, 3 weeks before the first presidential debate with Joe Biden, you institute executive actions that had a dramatic impact, really shut down people crossing over. Why didn't your administration do that in 2022, 2023?
First of all, you're exactly right, Anderson. And as of today, we have cut the flow of immigration by over half. In fact, the numbers I saw most recently, illegal immigration
But if
is
it was
low.
that easy with that executive action, why not do it in 2022, 2023?
Because we were working with Congress and hoping that actually we could have a long-term fix to the problem instead of a short-term fix.
You couldn't have done one and both at the same time?
Well, here's the thing. We have to understand that ultimately this problem is going to be fixed through congressional action. Congress has the authority and the purse. I hate to use D.C. terms, but literally they write the checks. And that requires bipartisan work.
Do you wish you'd done those executive orders in 2022, 2023?
I think we did the right thing. But the best thing that can happen for the American people is that we have bipartisan work happening. And I pledge to you that I will work across the aisle to fix this long-standing problem.
Now, the next important clip in this, and this is specifically for the Democratic voting base, has to do with the whole Israel-Gaza situation, where Kamala Harris is asked about what she would do from a voter that's concerned about this particular issue, and says that this may be the thing that's stopping them from voting for Kamala Harris. And her response on this is really terrible.
My question is, as president, what would you do to ensure not another Palestinian dies due to bombs being funded by U.S. tax dollars?
Look, I've made it 100% clear on this channel what my position is, that the governing force of the territory of Gaza, being Hamas, attacked Israel. Israel has the right to remove that government for power, a la the United States helping to remove the Nazi government from power, the Japanese government from power, and pursue a surrender. And I think the ceasefire deal is actually Israel surrendering, because if you have an attack at this scale against your country and you are forced due to international pressure to let that government remain in power, then they will be able to get away with anything going forward and you'll never actually have a peace. In fact, there is a great essay on this called The Ceasefire Talk that talks about how the push for ceasefires from the international community actually prolongs the conflict, and I actually want the conflict to end. That being said, that's my position. It is unpopular a lot of places in the United States of America, but Kamala's position is infinitely worse and less well-reasoned than that.
So I will say, and I think this is to your point, far too many innocent Palestinian civilians have been killed. It's unconscionable. And we are now at a place where with Sinwar's death, I do believe we have an opportunity to end this war, bring the hostages home, bring relief to the Palestinian people, and work toward a two-state solution where Israel and the Palestinians in equal measure have security, where the Palestinian people have dignity, self-determination, and the safety that they so rightly deserve.
So two things. One, if it is unconscionable that we are funding the Israelis, who are our allies in the region, then you should stop funding them. Period, point blank. If that's the position that you're going to take, that it's unconscionable, then you shouldn't do the unconscionable thing. And the second thing I will say is that, remember, the premise of this question is that this voter agrees with Kamala on all these other different various things, but this is the one issue that's holding her up. Something that Anderson Cooper is going to remind her of in a second.
What do you say to voters who are thinking about supporting a third-party candidate or staying on the couch, not voting at all because of this issue?
Listen, I am not going to deny the strong feelings that people have. I don't know that anyone who has seen the images who would not have strong feelings about what has happened, much less those who have relatives who have died and been killed. And I know people and have talked with people. So I appreciate that. But I also do know that for many people who care about this issue, they also care about bringing down the price of groceries. They also care about our democracy and not having a president of the United States who admires dictators and is a fascist. They also care about the fact that we need practical, common sense solutions from a leader who is willing to work across the aisle on behalf of the American people and not themselves. They want a president who cares about a fundamental freedom to make decisions about your own body, understanding that we're not trying to change anyone's belief, but let's not have the government telling women what to do with their body.
Now look, that is really bad, honestly. And while it is fine for me to point out that a lot of these people who put this conflict above every other issue are in fact the real Israel first kind of people, the fact of the matter is, the premise of the question is that this is the issue that is preventing them from voting for Kamala Harris, and she's saying to somebody who would likely call what's going on in Gaza a genocide, well, I'm sure you care about affordable groceries too, and all these other different various policies. Now, I happen to believe that the American domestic policies matter more than any other conflict in the world. We should obviously emphasize the United States of America first, but the fact of the matter is, the person who's saying stop the genocide isn't going to be swayed by, hey, would you like your eggs to be $1 cheaper and your gasoline $1 cheaper as well? That's a ridiculous answer to that question. It's a horrible answer to that question. And considering if she loses a state like Michigan, it's probably going to be due in large part to the Arab and Muslim vote. This is a disastrous response to those people who don't seem like they would typically vote for a Republican or not vote for a Democrat, but are considering those options when it comes to you being on the ballot. Again, embarrassing moment right there for Kamala Harris, and an absolutely terrible answer on a question that she should know is coming. And the crazy thing about this is that in her original interview, if you guys will remember, I actually gave her credit for the way that she answered this question, because essentially she's trying to say as little as possible about this while making everybody feel good, and she managed to do that over there. But over here, she's like, well, if you're concerned about genocide, just think about the non-genocide that will be happening to your grocery bill. It's like, Kamala, what is even wrong with you?
I don't think I've ever heard the former president admit a mistake. A lot of politicians don't. Is there something you can point to in your life, political life or in your life in the last 4 years, that you think is a mistake that you have learned from?
I also like that they asked her a basic job interview question that I honestly find very annoying, which is, can you think of a mistake that you made? And this also caused a rambling, insane, incoherent answer, where of course she didn't acknowledge a single mistake that she made in politics, but she did say, I'm not perfect, so maybe you just feel humble about that.
I mean, I've made many mistakes. And they range from, if you've ever parented a child, you make lots of mistakes too. In my role as vice president, I've probably worked very hard at making sure that I am well versed on issues. And I think that is very important. It's a mistake not to be well versed on an issue and feel compelled to answer a question.
Now, to be 100% clear, I'm not somebody who attacks step parents or anything of the sort. If you come into a child's life during their developing years and you help raise them, you get all the credit in the world. In fact, my wife has a step parent that came into her life when she was younger, and that was the man who ended up walking her down the aisle, and that was due to the love and respect that had grown over years. That being said, the age of the child is kind of relevant when you come into their lives, and Kamala's talking about as a parent, to distract from the fact that she never had any children of her own, and when she came into the lives of her now stepchildren, they were well on their way to adulthood. I believe the youngest one was something like 15 years old at that moment in time. So for her to do this reads incredibly fake and incredibly inauthentic, especially when you compare her to the evil orange man, who has a whole mess of kids. Now, the evil orange man has kids with 3 different women, not exactly a conservative pillar in terms of family structure there, but facts are facts. The woman, she had barely enough time to parent any of these children, and I don't know what the situation is with her husband and the mother of those children, but I'm assuming that she's probably in those children's lives. So very odd way of phrasing this, honestly, for Kamala Harris, in my opinion. It seems like a misdirect, and it feels incredibly dishonest, in my opinion. That being said,
Vice President, everybody as human beings, we're not perfect. We have our flaws. We make mistakes. We have our weaknesses. And the office of the presidency can sometimes bring those weaknesses out in ways that the incumbent may not expect. What weaknesses do you bring to the table, and how do you plan to overcome them while you're in office?
That's a great question, Joe. Well, I am certainly not perfect, so let's start there.
she ends up going into this other rant, and I just have to play it for you so you can understand it.
Perhaps a weakness, some would say, but I actually think it's a strength, is I really do value having a team of very smart people around me who bring to my decision-making process different perspectives. My team will tell you, I am constantly saying, let's kick the tire on that. Let's kick the tires on it. And that is why I engage and bring folks around. So I may not be quick to have the answer as soon as you ask it about a specific policy issue sometimes, because I'm going to want to research it. I'm going to want to study it. I'm kind of a nerd sometimes, I confess. And some might call that a weakness, especially if you're, in an interview or just kind of, being asked a certain question and you're expected to have the right answer right away. But that's how I work.
Democrats, you decided to throw out President Joe Biden for this woman. You decided to initiate a coup against your president, against your Democratic nominee, to install her, and your justification was Joe Biden had $30 million in the campaign account, and the only person he could transfer that money to was her. And this is what she's delivering. And by the way, you should have known that she wasn't a good candidate because she didn't even make it to the Iowa caucuses in 2020. And again, this question is so basic. It's so easy. It's not difficult at all whatsoever. And there are a number of directions she could go with this question. She could easily pick any of her policy positions from her 2019 campaign that she has completely abandoned and said, you know what? It was a mistake to support that. Over time, I've learned a lot about policy. I've learned a lot about what can get through the legislature working with Joe Biden, who is a creature of the Senate. And now I support these other things because I've learned, based on these issues, what is workable in this country versus what isn't. Now, that's not the best answer, but another answer that she could go for is she could say, hey, look, I attacked Joe Biden on the debate stage. I didn't know him all that well, but as I've gotten close with him over the years, I realized that he has an absolutely amazing heart. He cares about Black America and all that, because remember, she attacked him as an evil white racist, and that was a mistake on my part to question his character in that way, because I've seen that. That is a perfectly adequate thing for her to do. That is a perfectly adequate thing for her to acknowledge, and would make her sound more loyal and more caring to Joe Biden, while also going out of her way to not endorse his policies, which is what she's doing right now. So you have a crazy situation where Kamala Harris looks like she's kind of denouncing the character of Joe Biden, but she has no policy differences between him that she can suggest to the public, which is what people want the separation of. They don't want her to actually denounce him in terms of character. People tend to like Joe Biden. This is something that I told you in the lead up to the 2020 election, why he was going to be a much better candidate than Hillary Clinton, but they don't like his policies. So she's doing the reverse of what she needs to do. But then she wraps it up with the whole, I'm a nerd. Please stop, Kamala, stop. Now look, maybe if you guys are interested in me covering this more, I'll talk about the media reaction to this, because even her biggest lapdogs in the mainstream media did not like this performance, and there's a reason for that. You've seen the clips. If you can watch the whole thing, I will link all the parts in the description, but just know it doesn't get better in any section of this. And it's amazing how Kamala Harris can consistently get worse and worse as we go down the stretch to the election. People talk about how you're supposed to close. She's not closing right now. She's imploding, and it's kind of amazing. But you know what? That's all I really have for you guys today. Thank you so much for watching. As per usual, if you like the video, show them by leaving a like, subscribe for more content, follow me on my social medias, support me via the support links in the description of this video. This has been me talking about Kamala's disastrous town hall. Till next time.